John Hook's Newsmaker starts now.
Thank you for joining us on Newsmaker. I'm Steve Nielsen in for John Hook. It's one of the biggest stories nationally. It's impacting a lot of Arizona families. We're talking about immigration enforcement. As we record this, massive protests and riots in Los Angeles. ICE has been detaining people across the country since the Trump administration came into power. And locally, protests began outside immigration court just as ICE agents and prosecutors seemed to switch legal tactics. But before we speak with a prominent immigration attorney here in Phoenix, I want you to know that we invited ICE onto Newsmaker. The Department of Homeland Security, though, they sent us a statement instead saying that they're implementing the rule of law. In that statement, they said, most aliens who illegally entered the United States within the past 2 years are subject to expedited removals. Biden ignored this legal fact and chose to release millions of illegal aliens, including violent criminals, into the country with a notice to appear before an immigration judge. ICE is now following the law and placing these illegal aliens in expedited removal, as they always should have been. I have a feeling our guest is going to have a lot to say about that. We have Nic Suriel joining us, a Valley immigration attorney. Thanks for coming on, Nic. Appreciate you.
Pleasure, Steve.
You were in court the day that sort of all of this came to a head here in Phoenix. There was a switch in strategy a couple of weeks ago as far as how the feds were enforcing this immigration law. So what changed here? What sort of set all this up?
What changed is that so I was case number 3, okay? So there were 2 cases in front of me. Is that the prosecutor, they're called trial attorneys, orally motioned to the court to terminate, to dismiss the cases. And the lawyer ahead of me was like aghast. Why did you bother to do all of this just to have us come to court and then dismiss the cases, right?
At a certain point, I imagine the clients there, they thought they won, right? If it's dismissed, are they thinking that's good news? Or are they just kind of confused?
They're confused,
Yeah.
Very confused, yeah. I had actually filed a motion for my case, so I was case number 3, to dismiss because I had an approval, okay? The main point I want to make, Steve, is that yes, I was a witness. I actually saw the ICE agents coming up, in fact, brushed up against them, and I thought there was a very, significant criminal in court, which sometimes happens. But really what they were picking up were people following the law. And that's the main message I'm coming to talk to you about. Nonviolent, peaceful protests is what we're about in this country. Okay, so that's not what's happening in Los Angeles. And I will tell your audience, absolutely, violence has no place in our legal system, in our method of protesting. So in court, so that was Tuesday morning. I was there.
Yeah.
I had a front row seat. In fact, I was right there, and here are people getting their cases dismissed. I told the court I had filed a motion to dismiss my client's case, but the prosecutor said, no, we don't want to dismiss that case. Why? Because he's got a remedy, all right? So this is something that I want to really stress here today, and that is allow law to go forward, okay? Recently, people who have U visas, these are people who are witnesses to violent crimes, are being picked up. I think that's wrong. People say, why don't they get in line? Why don't they do it right? Well, people going to court, people filing U visa cases, people filing, today I had 3 hearings, okay? We went to the hearings, we did what was supposed to be happening. That's what we want. If you look at what's occurred after the National Guard got to Los Angeles, what's occurred is that an escalation. We have now a situation that didn't need to get that far. Now, you could disagree with me and say, listen, the president can invoke federalism and come into Los Angeles and bring in the National Guard. Yes, you can. But at what cost? That's really the point I want to bring today, and that is, listen, I think we can all agree, okay? Let the whatever you want to call them, illegal aliens, undocumented workers, let them have a process, right? It is true. Under President Biden, they were way too lax. I talked to a lot of people who came to see me, a week, a month after they had arrived here, and I said, how many questions did they ask you about what your well-founded fear was? And they said, none.
None. They didn't ask any.
Didn't ask any, and then they were allowed in, and I thought, this is not good. right? So that
I mean, there could be some good people in there, and they just weren't asked those questions. But just like any system in the world, that's going to be exploited like crazy, I imagine.
and it was.
Yeah.
It was. So what's happening now, the enforcement that's happening now, it's necessary. Okay. All I'm saying is, let's be reasonable. All right. Low-hanging fruit, meaning people with no criminal history, people who are showing up to court, people who are demonstrating peacefully. Let's allow law to rule, right? A lot of people don't understand, you know. I'll give you a little wonky thing, okay? We have a specific section of the Immigration and Nationality Act that says if you can prove you've been continuously physically present in the United States, you can apply. You can apply to become a U.S. resident. Unfortunately, that law hasn't been updated in a long time. It requires that you prove that you've been here since January 1 of 1972. That's a stretch. It's going to be 54 years soon. So I say, wait, Congress? You know what, Steve? Listen, today, the United States Congress could modify just 3 things in the Immigration and Nationality Act, and all of these problems would go away. Number 1, allow a higher cap on a lot of the things that people apply for. I just mentioned the U visa, which is if you've been the victim of a crime, you call police, and you're helping law enforcement, then we're going to give you a path to get a green card, okay? Right now, there's 10,000 people in the entire United States. The backlog right now is 14 years, okay? See, people don't get it. Immigration is about waiting.
Yeah,
okay?
14 years.
Oh, and that's average, okay? I waited 15 years to get my green card back in 1982.
Wow.
I became a citizen the first day I was eligible in 1987. Okay, so you have to wait. The patience that immigrants have to have is something I wish more of our general population had.
I want to go back to that day in court.
Yes.
And what sort of changed there. By dropping those cases, I talked with one attorney who said it was sort of a sneaky tactic, maybe legal, but unethical was how he sort of described it to me. And that is, by dropping those cases, now they're just sort of here and there's nothing in front of the court. So that's illegal in and of itself. Get them out of the country. Is that the idea of that tactic?
Yes. So there are two tactics. One is that what happened on Tuesday, the first day that this dismissal and then expedited removal happened, is that what they were counting on is that because those people going to court had been here less than 2 years, then they were picked up right after because they could expeditiously remove those people. However, the court says if you can present a well-founded fear of returning to your home country, then expedited removal must give you that option. Okay, and so that's the other reason that they're dismissing cases. It makes no sense to me, because if you have somebody in proceedings, all right, then allow them to present the case, right? The case that I presented, I was the case number 3, is a case that she was the victim of domestic violence. And I got that, it's called an I-360, that was approved. So I said, listen, why am I coming to court when I have a remedy in front of the Department of Homeland Security? That's the other door in the immigration system. And I had followed the law. I filed a motion to terminate my client's case because I had jurisdiction elsewhere, and the prosecutor opposed, and so therefore, the case that should have been terminated was mine. And they didn't do it.
So I was just in touch with a family out in Mesa. Father of, I believe, 4 kids. He's been here 20 years. They say he's got no criminal convictions. He's never been arrested, nothing like that. Had a status hearing set up for next month. He was just picked up. It seems like what's sort of lost in all of this was that original move of saying, let's get people with criminal convictions and let's get them out of this country. I think everyone's on board with that. Nobody wants someone here who's a criminal, who's not supposed to be here in the first place, get them out of here. But by being here for 20 years, it creates this incredibly emotional dynamic. His wife's a U.S. citizen, his children are U.S. citizens. What is that solution? It seems so complicated to try to just get everyone on the same page here. Nobody's on the same page.
I don't know why. I mean, what that gentleman, if he has no criminal conviction, he meets all 4 of the elements of a cancellation case. That's the most common case presented to immigration courts. Okay, and so the argument is, Judge, please allow me to remain with my wife, my U.S. citizen wife, my U.S. citizen children, because they're going to suffer exceptional and extremely unusual hardship. So it's a hardship case. So you need a skilled practitioner, you know, somebody with experience to present these cases.
That's the problem right there. Let's be honest, attorneys are expensive. Immigration attorneys might be the cheapest attorneys you can get, though. I was going to mention this to you. I mean, if you're an immigration attorney out there, just a shout out to all immigration attorneys, only because I think you guys are probably the most underpaid attorneys that are out there, and probably the most overworked attorneys. You have to be passionate to get into what you're doing. There is a cost barrier here, isn't there, for a lot of people?
Yeah, you know what's funny is that the Hispanic, Mexican, Latino community, they're used to going to these notarios, people who now, you know, here we're notary publics that just notarize your signature. So they go to these people that fill out papers, and they wind up paying more. I mean, Steve, the case that I won on May 9th, okay, before all of this started, was a cancellation case that has started 15 years earlier.
Wow.
Yeah, and so we were able to present this significant evidence to win the case, all right? And so for 6 years of litigation, you know, I got paid $5,000. Yeah, that is kind of poverty wages. I was just talking to somebody today in court, and they told me that intellectual property lawyers are now charging $1,800 an hour.
An hour.
We were just kind of chuckling at that. Yeah, immigration court, we do it.
It's not where the money is.
We do it because, you know what? It's like David versus Goliath, and it's a challenge. I mean, that's what's kept me going.
I want to walk through the process of, as people were being detained and taken out of immigration court in Phoenix, there was a lot of protesters there on the Wednesday. I was there for that. I felt unsure about where that was going to be going at different points, because there was a lot of pushing and shoving. The protesters started that. They tried to block the van. They started pushing. The ICE agents, they started pushing back pretty firmly in response. You know, at this point, there's not that many people there, so you're just not really sure if it's going to break out into fistfights, arrests. You just don't know where this is going. We're all right in the middle of it there. And one thing I kept hearing from everyone was, take off your masks. They were shouting at the ICE agents. ICE has said, well, our agents are getting death threats. I mean, I think you look at what's going on in LA. I think it's easy to believe they're getting death threats. This is a dangerous time for, I think, everybody out there.
It is, and that's why we need to de-escalate. We need to come back to civility. We can disagree, but we don't have to hate each other, okay? What I witnessed when I went out the back door, you know, after being case number 3, you know, and not getting my client's case dismissed or terminated, yeah, I saw all these ICE agents with a lot of, you know, gear and such, and it was a bit overwhelming, I thought, because I mean, everybody that was in court, you know, they're non-criminals, right? And they were doing what they were supposed to do. Now, I always say this to people, okay? The agitators, the demonstrators that say, like, we should abolish ICE, and it's like, but what are you going to replace it with, you know? So I actually almost talked to the ICE agents, but I've been doing this long enough, and I said to myself, I was just going to say, hey guys, what's going on here? I mean, there's 16 of you right here. I was, you know, and so, yeah, you know, pushing, shoving, doing all that kind of stuff. No, I mean, people feel very passionate. In Phoenix today, Steve, in Phoenix today, I was like, wow, look at all these F-ICE T-shirts. It's like, you know, so this is really hits home.
This is really hitting home for a lot of people right now.
Yeah.
A lot of emotions on all sides. Just want people to stay safe out there, get your voices heard, do it in a smart way, cinder blocks thrown, none of that. I mean, that's just, come on. Really appreciate you joining us. And I will say, we asked ICE if they're going to keep continuing to do this at court, showing up at hearings like this there. They said they can't. A spokesperson said they're not going to talk to us about what their future plans are with all of that. So
I can tell you, if you want, I can tell you what's happening. Okay?
Yeah.
They're following people after their court hearings, and they're pulling them over. So that's the new tactic.
Interesting. This won't be the last time we talk about this.
Happy to do it.
Nic Suriel, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate the conversation.
It's great. It's a good topic, and people need to just bring it down.
Yeah. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Your home insurance rates are going up. That's for all of us across the board. And trying to understand what goes into those rates, the formulas all of those insurance companies use, you want to pull your hair out trying to understand all of it. But undoubtedly, whether you live in a wildfire-prone area or not, all of our rates are going up because of wildfires. You can look at what happened in the LA wildfires back in January. The cost there in the billions, so monumental. All of us will likely feel that. Some of us feel it more than others, though. I want to turn to Coconino County. The Flagstaff area has seen massive wildfires in recent years. Notably, there was the 2022 pipeline and tunnel fires in the San Francisco Peaks. It burned homes, but then after the fires, it actually led to months of massive flooding that caused even more damage. The Consumer Federation of America now says Arizonans have faced the third largest increase at home insurance costs, with a 48% increase in our state. So let's bring in our first guest here, Lucinda Andreani with the Coconino County Flood Control District. Those are huge numbers. I want to talk, though, about not just the cost of it, though, because some people are able to pay that, some people aren't able to pay the increases there. Some residents, though, are just not able to get insurance at all right now in Coconino County. Is that right?
That is correct, although we've seen primarily increases in the rates, but some of those rates are doubling, tripling, and quadrupling. Significant increases. We have had some locations where there have been non-renewals and some locations where they have indicated they would not, provide insurance. We're not aware that this situation has affected anyone's mortgage as of this point, but obviously that's a concern.
Well, you talk about the mortgage. That's because if you can't get insurance, well, the bank isn't going to be happy about that because there's nothing protecting their financial investment in that situation. Is that when we look down the line here of what's going on, because this thing's cannonballed in the last few years, is that just a few years away from happening?
It's interesting because there are various models being undertaken, particularly in California, to some extent in Colorado, that have provided for other mechanisms for people to secure insurance. We're also understanding that the mortgage companies may go secure the insurance on behalf of a set of, property owners that they may cover across an area, not just even Arizona, maybe more broadly, to try to drive down the rates, working with the insurance companies. But those costs will be, very likely would be passed on, to the mortgage holder. And so I think, we're seeing this, and it's a very complex issue. As you noted, how they set rates is affected by a number of factors. And not only wildfire. It's important to understand that the disasters that we've had across the country, hurricanes, tornadoes, other forms of disasters, flooding, etc., are all contributing to the increase in rates, not only in Arizona, but again, across the country.
It's such a good point. It's not just wildfires, but that's a key part of it, especially here in Arizona where we don't have a lot of natural disasters. That's sort of the big one that hurts us here. When you look at what happened with the California wildfires, put into the spotlight was the FAIR plan, which is sort of that state-run insurance where the state backs it up, the state collects the money there. Right. I know there's other states that have similar plans, like that FAIR plan. We don't have one of those here in Arizona as that last resort insurance for someone that's struggling to get insurance that might be in an extremely fire-prone area. Is that something we should have here? Should we look into getting that?
It certainly should be investigated, and there is established by the Governor Hobbs, established a council under the Department of Insurance and Financial Institutions, what we affectionately call DIFI. That is a resiliency mitigation council, and one of the key things they're looking at is the wildfire insurance dynamic, and it has representatives from the industry and various, I'll say, stakeholders, and including the counties are represented through our county association, state association. And certainly one of the things that we would expect them to look at is, do we need some form of last resort option for insurance? As you mentioned, California has done, some other states have done.
What I thought was interesting when I was looking at just sort of what anyone would search for online if they're trying to find insurance not able to. Just how would you Google it? What would come up? What would you see? I found the state's website. They list a whole bunch of companies that they say these insurance companies, no matter your situation, they're going to represent you. They're going to cover you.
I'm not an expert in the insurance industry, but certainly there are a number, of companies that are still providing coverage. And, unfortunately, people may have to take some time to identify those companies and, work with them. Some may want to come inspect your property. Some, may want to take other, are going to look at it and have to go through a process to get back to you to know if they'll provide coverage or not. Where we're seeing this trending toward is that a lot of people in our area have looked to the Forest Service. And we've been partnering with the Forest Service to conduct forest restoration projects, particularly those that would contribute to post-wildfire flooding. Because as you mentioned, we've had a lot of devastation from that. Forest Service has done a pretty good job around not all, but many of our communities in the forested areas. But now we're seeing a greater risk within the communities. And one of the things that was discussed at the initial meeting and there'll be a future meeting devoted to this topic, is what are property owners going to need to do to actually harden their homes? What are the processes and techniques and things you're going to have to do? We talked a lot about Firewise, and many people have done defensible space. Probably going to have to do more of that, but also the hardening, which is going to be a fairly significant investment. And one of the things I would like to see this council look at is, how do we set up the mechanisms through the mortgage companies or other financial entities, to support people with making those investments in their homes. They're trying to figure out how to manage that. And, the numbers, $70 billion in losses, and that was
huge.
I don't think that even included LA. Tremendous impacts they're trying to manage. And so it's going to take a number of actions on a number of fronts to deal with this issue.
Yeah, I mean, the perspective here from these insurance companies, they're a private company. They're trying to turn a profit here. They're looking at this and they're saying, okay, you can pay us this amount of money, $4 or $5K a year for this insurance, but we calculate in the next 2 years, 3 years, your home's going to burn. Well, it doesn't make sense when you add $15K into what the cost of the replacement of that house is going to be, according to that data they work out there. So they're, that's what they're trying to figure out is, does it make that financial sense? So it's a lot to figure out, and no one can really force their hands here. So it's going to be interesting to see that. Hopefully, I love what you're talking about with the fire prevention, that mitigation efforts. Hopefully those insurance companies, there's a way to communicate with with them so that they can come to that property, see what you've done, and see that, hey, maybe we're not as much at risk as you think we are on paper. So appreciate you.
Follow-up points to that is one, we will have to work very closely with insurance companies, because if I just in my neighborhood, which is frankly needs a lot of work, I'm right here in Flagstaff, that it's going to take a neighborhood community level effort, right? At least a neighborhood level effort to accomplish risk reduction. And one home here and there isn't going to produce.
Sure, it's got to be everyone working on this together.
Is what you mentioned about who has authority, and certainly our Board of Supervisors and any county Board of Supervisors, frankly, across the country, has no authority over insurance companies. That they are regulated at the state level, and very little regulation at the federal level. So that is very important to note, as you did.
Appreciate it. Lucinda, thank you so much for joining us, Coconino County Flood Control District. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
We'll be right back. Well, I'm Steve Nielsen in for John Hook on this week's Newsmaker. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you back again next week.